Has anyone ever honored one of those if we're still single at 40 let's get married commitments? How did it go? I did. I dated my first girlfriend when we were about 17-19. Then she broke up with me, but we had said such a thing before while we were still dating. We both had a few boy girlfriends over the years, but about 15 years later we met again and essentially said I really didn't find anyone with whom I felt like I did with you. But it wasn't with resignation, more of an epiphany. So we started dating again, and married soon after, and couldn't be happier. Had one for 30 and moving in together. She was 7 years my senior, and around that time we were both in a transient part of our lives, so I asked. She said no and moved across the country. Nope. Scoots 3,000 miles away to emphasize the point. That's cold. We didn't do this exactly, but when we were 19 we joked that we should get married if we're both 35 and single. 2 years later, I came home for a week from college. We hung out in our normal friend group, and she and I hooked up for the first time. We ended up starting a relationship, got married when we were 27, and are still together at 30. Not a result of the pact obviously, but funny that we ended up married anyways. Sounds like the perfect opportunity to ask her to marry you at 35 and renew your vows to keep your pact. We ended up getting married at 30 instead. As it turns out we loved each other and made every excuse to ignore it. I know a couple at my church who were friends first, like best friends, and when they got in their 30s they still weren't engaged or married to anyone, so they decided to get married. They're still together and very much in love. Love really is a verb. It's something you do, not something that just is. I think, if memory serves, my wife and I had one of those, but we ended up together and married in our early 20s. I had one of these with my best female friend from high school, but it was 30 not 40. Meanwhile I'd gotten married twice before 30 and she would have been my best. Whoa, man at both weddings, but she was in OCS the first time, deployed the second time. Doesn't seem meant to be, does it? All that said, if something weird happened and I was single and she remembered the pact, I'd absolutely hold up my side. Sounds like she won't attend any wedding you're in unless it's you and her lol. Weird couple my wife knew had such a pact and followed through. Girl was a really introverted, quiet, homely type. Sweetest girl, but she never had a boyfriend as far as I knew, and we saw her off and on for 6 or 7 years. Then suddenly out of nowhere she invited us to her wedding. Anyways, it was to a guy we had met a couple of times who was one of her friends who seemed very much like her. My wife teased her that more must have been going on all that time, but she was straight up about it and said no, they just decided it was time. Conversation was something like, yeah, you know how people have pacts to get married if neither of them are till they hit. Well, we just decided it really wasn't going to happen for either of us. And to cut that short, basically we were just like, cool, and then left it at that. Anyways, she married him. They looked happy. The speeches were a bit odd. They didn't really talk about love but a lot about how they were marrying their best friend. They are still together. It's gotta be at least 5 years. And they have a little kid. Last we saw them they looked happy and that's all that matters really. Sounds like they're being honest with themselves. I've seen and experienced too many relationships fail because of unreasonable or unvocalized expectations. And marrying your best friend sounds awesome. Nietzsche said, it is not a lack of love, but a lack of friendship that makes unhappy marriages. Had one to get married at 30. I got married before that and I don't think my friend took it well. We had sort of a strained relationship after and now we don't really talk much. Used to be best friends. Your best friend should have asked you out back then, instead of waiting until you both were 30 years. Friends since we were 14 in high school. Made a pact in our early 20s about if we were 30, childless, unhappy, etc. Got married at 30. 7 years later it's still the best relationship we've ever had and going strong. I've got a roller coaster of a story. So when I was a kid we got a new neighbor. He was great, had a cute dog, seemed to have his life together, but was chronically single despite his best efforts. Few months later we hear he got married, much to everyone's surprise, because he clearly hadn't been seeing anyone prior. Turns out he had made a pact to marry his best female friend when they both turned 30, if they weren't in a relationship, and they followed through. She was the world's sweetest person, and really pretty to boot. Frankly, everyone was surprised that either of them felt this was necessary to begin with. She'd moved across the country to be with him, so she didn't have any family nearby, and that's probably partly how we all became so close. Anyhow, they were actually crazy happy together, got another dog, etc. The only thing that seemed off was that despite several years of him and her talking about desperately wanting kids, she was pretty well always interacting with me. They were still childless, which everyone assumed was owing to a medical issue. Then we learned that, while an absolutely fantastic and loving husband went sober, he made for a mean drunk. This culminated in her snapping and pulling a knife on him, and leaving. They were separated for a few years, during which time neither wanted to explore divorce other relationships, because they still loved each other, and her leaving was definitely the boot he needed to get his rear in gear. He spent those years with Alanon, became incredibly involved in his church and community, and spent a lot of effort winning her back, convincing her he changed. They're now together and seemingly happy as ever. We only know all of this because he was super open about his problems with his community, doing some advocacy stuff. He had one brief fall off the wagon, but checked into rehab, or something like it, almost immediately, and has since been doing well. They've both decided not to have kids, because they're not sure he could handle the stress and the temptation to start drinking again. They've recently moved to an acreage in a very remote area, so we don't hear from them as often, but last I heard they were doing really well. Ah yes, it's not a noise. I did that. I met her in high school. We grew apart over the years. We reconnected and said let's get married if we're both single when we're 40. Then we said frick it, let's go to Vegas and get married by Elvis. Our first kiss was Thanksgiving Day and we were married on the 17th of December. We're still going strong after 7 years. Longest relationship I've been in, best decision of my life. It wasn't for marriage, but in high school, I had a deal with my wife that if she was single at the time she'd go to prom with me. We ended up dating a few months after that, and have been together for 12 years now. Wholesome. I didn't know this was actually a thing for other people. I had one of these though. Here's my story. My family has a summer place on a lake in another state where I have gone every summer since I was a baby. Other families did the same, so I grew up with these other families' kids. There was like 10 kids in our group and we spent almost every waking hour hanging out together. One of the girls in the group was about a year older and kinda shy and chubby. Not that it mattered though, we were just really good friends. Fast forward to our early 30s years. She had moved away from her small town much to the amazement of her family. It was the kind of small town that you were born in and would probably die in. Nobody ever left, but she did. She had a great job where she was able to make and save a ton of money. She had also lost weight and had become crazy beautiful. At the same time, most of our group of friends were getting married and working on having families. As a joke, one of our friends said, hey, if you two are still single when you hit 40, you have to marry each other. We had been drinking, so it was easy to get us to agree. Fast forward again. Before I hit 40, I met the love of my life and have 2 badass little ones. The girl from the lake had moved back to her little town and fell into the trap. She met a dude at a bar one night who got her pregnant and was never to be seen again. She was alone with her little one and, to be close to her family, she remained in the little town and had abandoned the path of a successful life that she had been on before. We still see each other every summer, and my wife hates it. She says it's so obvious that she still has a crush on you. It's weird how when you look back you can see those decisions that seem small at the time but have a huge effect on life. I could have married her and she would have been in a better place now. But I would not be where I am now if I went down that road. Life is weird, man. I had several pacts like this over the years. Within a year, they were all in serious relationships. I was like the wedding bargain matchmaker. All good though. Been with a great woman for almost 4 years now, and we were good friends for 7 years before that. I had this one friend I would hook up with on and off for years, and we had this pact if she hit 30 we would marry. I would be 35. I always avoided actually dating her because she cheated on every boyfriend she was ever with and was a bit of a nomad. I told her I didn't want to ruin the friendship. When I got engaged to my wife, my FWB was livid. She figured she can have all the fun and we'd get married at some point. I never spoke to her again after my engagement. She got married last year. I congratulated her but got no response. My friend and I had something like that in high school, but it was 30 and we ended up dating until we turned 30 and got married. A friend and I made a pact in college that we would marry each other if we're both single by the time I'm 30. I'm turning 30 in a few years. We barely spoke for the last 7 years. He now has a girlfriend and lives in another country. I don't think it's going to happen. I told my boyfriend that I will marry him when I retire. Now I have to work for the rest of my life. I will love you until the end of time. So now I'm waiting for the end of time. Hurry up, come on, arrive. Cause if I got to spend another minute with you I don't think I can really survive. I'll never break my promise or forget my vow, but God only knows what I could do right now. Waiting for the end of time so I can end my time with you. Oh God, no. Mine was with my best friend's mother. She actually made a point of reminding me a few years ago. My now husband and I have been friends since we were about 15. I watched that episode of Friends where they make said pact, so my girlfriends and I went ahead and chose one of our guy friends to settle with if we made it to 40 unmarried. So I chose my very good friend at the time, who even had a serious girlfriend. I knew that even if we weren't in love, that we'd still have a great time together, and that he'd always treat me well. We started dating about 7 years later and have been married for almost 2. Didn't need to wait until 40, but I'm happy we got started early and happy we're actually in love. My 8th grade English teacher actually. Her and her husband were roommates and said if they were both single by 35 they'd get married. Well, they got married, had 2 kids, and they're still together about 8 years and counting as far as I know. I had one with a friend a while back, but at age 27, she was murdered 2 years ago. I turned 27 in January. Still hurts me heart, but I have an incredible woman now but my memory of her is so great. So sorry for your loss. I had one with my best friend in high school. We're both gay, lesbian and a gay man, and knew we'd want to adopt kids. Flash forward 4 years and I go to visit him. His roommate is gorgeous, funny, and incredibly kind. Turns out she was also moving across the country in a month. But we couldn't stop talking and ended up together. Long story short, I didn't end up marrying him but I am going to marry his former roommate. I made a pact with my childhood best friend when we were young teens to get married if we were both still single at 30. Ended up getting together almost 4 years ago in our mid-20s, haha. We've brought up the pact before and decided it still stands. My neighbor and I made this pact walking home from the bus stop in 3rd or 4th grade. If we were still unmarried by 30, we'd get married to each other. I emphasize unmarried because we have both been in serious relationships for 4+ years in our late 20s, but I wasn't giving him any other loopholes. He turned 29 in December 2018 and I turned 29k in January 2019. I dumped my long-term loser boyfriend. He proposed to his amazing and beautiful long-term girlfriend. Should not have put all my eggs in that basket. My friend Danny and I made this pact when we were like 12. We went to camp together for a few summers. Then his mom died and they didn't come back after that. But we were pen pals for years. Real old-fashioned letters in the mail, and eventually email. Until one day, I'd say we were in our 20s, and he said I met someone, and his name is Scott. And now I'm married to a lady, so maybe that's why we got along so well as kids. If gay marriage was still illegal you could get married and all 4 live in the same house for tax benefits. We had a pact that we would meet at the top of the Eiffel Tower. My dang heart got involved and I married her at 24, but I still took her to Paris when the time came. I had this deal with my best friend from tech school, Air Force, but we were young and stupid and said 27 instead of 40. I got engaged about 6 months before my 27th birthday, but even if I hadn't I don't think I would have honored it at such a young age. Now that I'm past it, turns out 27 feels too young to think. If it hasn't happened yet it never will. My BFF guy friend got married at 28. She is lovely and they are so happy. I am actually wearing the Wonder Woman shirt they gave me for the wedding photos right now. I was a groomswoman. Through our 20s we kept putting the date later. 30, then 35, then 40 etc. I tell ya though, if she passes away in some freak accident and he decided to revert to the plan, you bet I'd be all in. I don't have romantic feelings for him, but I know he is a kinky guy, so I could figure myself out for that lol. This took a few twists and turns. Long story short, married 15 years with a daughter, and it's been everything I could have hoped for and more. Now, granted, we dated in college and broke up over something stupid. Then for the next decade we were never both single at the same time for long, and things didn't time out well when we were both unattached. We never explicitly said it'd be marriage if we were both single at 40, but that's because neither of us believed in the institution for long. And I guess it doesn't entirely count because at 35 I just woke up one morning, 2.5 years into an otherwise successful relationship, and said, nope, this is BS. I'm with the wrong person. And without even consulting my future wife, I broke it off with the present girlfriend, called future wife, and was like, look, I know what I want and it's you. So maybe my case doesn't qualify because we actually happen to be in love without admitting it. Friends since we were 15. If neither of us are married when we're 28, we got engaged when he turned 28, 6 months before I did. We had just gotten done with a nighttime geocache. It was like 3 AM and our friend was in the car with us. He was driving, I was in the back seat. Friend was sitting shotgun. He mentioned the agreement. I literally said, I mean, your birthday is tomorrow. Why not? So we bought rings and announced it to family and friends. It did not go well. Neither the announcement, nor the engagement itself. I moved out and broke off the engagement within 4 months. We were meant to be best friends. We were not meant to cohabitate. He didn't even seem to care when I sat him down to talk about it. Wouldn't even turn off Thor. His parents were devastated. Mine were relieved. He and I went right back to being friends as though nothing happened. Had one, and when I said it I meant it. We've known each other since we were kids. Kind of an on-off FWB. Well, I lost interest when it was clear she wasn't over her ex. And when we did hook up again it just wasn't the same. It almost felt as if both of us were just settling and it didn't work. A big step backwards from the relationship we had where the idea was kind of an old flame fling type of deal. I made an agreement like this. We live in different states, and I'd moved cities since we knew each other during my college days. He found my mom's number, and she passed his message on to me. I knew that's why he was calling. I was married and pregnant when I got the message and never called back, but I think of him all the time. Like this video and this good boy will play you a nice song. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.